Joining us now is Kathy Kelly, peace activist and board chair of World Beyond War. Caleb Maupin, political journalist and founder of the Center for Political Innovation. Musician and recording sound design engineer Robert Auld, and educator and dancer Fumilayo Chesney. Is that all who's joined us so far? Yes. So welcome to the show, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.
Glad to be here.
So I had reached out to you, invited you to come on the show to reminisce on the first quarter of the 21st century, 25 years of historic events, sometimes horrifying, sometimes illuminating, inspiring, moving, even significant. And I wanted to sort of put it in the context of where we are now in this move from nation states to a global world to now a multipolarity world, what countries are jostling for power, what of the first quarter review, let's start with what was significant to you personally that happened in 2000 and where we are now. What was one first major event that shaped your perception, made you change life choices? We start with perhaps you, Kathy Kelly.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. I'll be very interested to hear what each person you've invited has to say. I'd like to sort of work my way backward in a sense. I think about the time when people broke into the buildings in Washington, D.C. because they believed that the election had been stolen. And it looked very shocking because people were destroying government property. They were breaking into buildings that we thought were very secure. They were doing grave harm to guards. And then President Biden said, "This is not who we are." And I thought, oh, yes, it is. This is just what the United States has done, and much worse, and far more murderously in other countries all around the world in the first quarter of this century. I was in Iraq and Baghdad during the shock and awe bombing, and I'd gone to Kabul many times after the United States had begun to bomb in Kabul and in Pakistan, and also have gone to Lebanon and to Jenin in the West Bank and to Gaza. All of these places horrifically destroyed, so much wreckage because the United States believed it had the right to use its terrible weapons to attack civilians who meant us no harm. And I suppose the other thing that I want to mention is that it was tragic that on 9/11, 2,977 people died because of 4 terrorist attacks. But oughtn't we not think about how COVID caused the deaths of an estimated 1,228,000 people? And much of it could have been prevented had it been responded to earlier and had there been more education. But at any rate, there was never the kind of vengeance that was shown following 9/11. So I think about the United States merchants of death, those who build up huge arsenals of weapons and those who use them again and again. And I believe that the greatest terror in the world today is my own government.
Mm-hmm. And Caleb Maupin?
Well, when I look over all the events of the first quarter of the 21st century, what comes to me is that we're just seeing the overall breakdown of the Western financial system. At the very beginning of the 21st century, I mean, we had the crash on the Asian markets. The economy was starting to decline. George W. Bush came into office, and we were starting to see a big economic downturn. President Putin had just been elected in Russia. Hugo Chavez had just been elected in Venezuela. And Bush came into office office, you had 9/11, and after 9/11, they lied about weapons of mass destruction. The USA invaded Iraq, and after the USA invaded Iraq, what was the result? Was the highest oil prices in human history, over $120 a barrel. It was just a huge bonanza because a major oil producing country, Iraq, was blown to bits. And then the USA put sanctions on Iran. And then there was the Nigerian oil workers strike. And suddenly the oil prices were the highest they'd ever been. And the result of that was that the government of Russia had been rebuilding itself by centering it around state controlled oil and gas. And so the Russian economy suddenly rebooted because they had a huge amount of revenue coming in from that oil money. And Venezuela, under the leadership of Hugo Chavez, they had nationalized the oil and they were using the oil, and they were able to kind of launch a continent-wide movement in South America of anti-imperialism. And Iran, that is an oil country that had an anti-colonial revolution, controls their oil resources. The state sector of the Iranian economy got way more oil revenue, and they were able to use that to fund their allies around the region. Hezbollah in Lebanon got stronger. And then Israel, you'll remember around 2006, Israel invaded Lebanon, and Hezbollah epically defeated the Israeli invaders and just became the heroes of the whole world for their driving Israel out of Lebanon in a way that no one had ever seen. And by 2006, 2007, it was clear that even though, the Soviet Union had been defeated, the Cold War was 20th century history, we now had this new, layer of countries that had broken out of Western dominance. And China was doing business with them and buying their oil and producing products. And China had built up a huge state-controlled, apparatus of steel production, the largest telecommunications manufacturer in the world. And that really the story of the 21st century has been kind of the rebound of the opposition to the Western colonial system, right? And meanwhile, then we have the financial crisis of 2008, which was that the Western financial system has this big problem, which is that human beings, are less and less necessary in production. Human beings, we sell our labor power to a boss, and then we use the money that we get to buy products, and we never get paid enough to buy back what we produce. But if you add artificial intelligence and the computer revolution and all the amazing breakthroughs in technology, this problem of production, of workers having no role at the assembly line and thus not being able to buy the products they produce becomes exacerbated like you wouldn't believe. And now we're continuing to live in the aftermath of the 2008 financial meltdown that was really just a continuation of the 2000 financial meltdown, which was really, just a continuation of this overall problem of the irrationality of the market and the great abundance created by modern technology not fitting into the narrow restraints of a system where profits are in command. And so the Western system is just continuing to crash and burn. Meanwhile, around the world, you have this kind of, new axis of resistance. I believe that's what the Middle Eastern forces called themselves, the axis of resistance. You referred to multipolarity. And that's really the story of the first 25 years of this century has been kind of the rebounding of the new economy in the world and the continued deterioration of the Western system that claimed that it had hegemony. Coming out of the defeat of the Soviet Union in the 90s, the Western system was declared to be the end of history. That's clearly not the case. Now it's in crisis, and there's a new world rising.
Okay, but if we look at what's just happening currently, you've got the U.S. attacking Venezuela, you've got the U.S. attacking Nigeria, and both those two countries, 80% of their oil goes to China. So is this really a proxy attack on China?
Well, it's an effort to control the international oil markets more than anything. I mean, Venezuela is an independent country. That the oil that they have is very much under the domination of Venezuela. I mean, they have publicly controlled their oil and used their oil to compete. Now, in Nigeria, most of the oil of Nigeria is basically the nationalized oil of Nigeria is just a kind of a cover for ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron. And yes, China is importing a lot of their oil, but at the same time, it's being done through Western, oil companies. So it's a little bit of a different situation. But yes, there is an effort to control the international oil markets. And the fact that Russia has built itself up as just a major oil exporter, that's a big factor. The other factor is hydraulic fracking, right? It used to be that the United States was dependent on, countries around the world to import oil. Now, with hydraulic fracking, we have our own oil here. And so it's more of a struggle to control the international oil markets. Saudi Arabia is is in a crisis because we don't, rely on them the way we used to. And Saudi Arabia used to get a lot out of the United States because we were desperate. We needed them. Well, now we don't need them anymore, and they're kind of entering a crisis. And that's why when Biden kind of demanded that they oppose Russia at the beginning of the special military operation, Saudi Arabia said, no, we're really not going to do that because we need to be able to negotiate oil price outputs with the Russian leadership, and we can't just cut them off. And also, you don't need us the way you used to, and we need to have other relationships. And so we saw that at the very beginning of the special military operation in Ukraine, as country after country that the USA assumed would just go along with them in isolating Russia didn't. Israel did a similar thing. India, Turkey, a number of countries basically said to the United States, look, you're demanding we just boycott Russia. We can't do that because they're an important part of the world economy. And China is a big friend of Russia. They're also an important part of the world economy. And we may not approve of what Russia's doing in Ukraine, but we're not going to go along with your unilateral decision. The whole world should just boycott Russia.
Mm. Robert Auld, if we could switch gears to music, or maybe you have a political take on what you noticed from the last 25 years and what stood out for you, and whether how your perceptions were shaped.
Yeah, well, when it comes to music, I am not actually up on the latest thing. I tend to be more interested in historical trends. So I'll talk a bit about what I've noticed politically, which is the last 5 years have been dominated by the fact that we had declared this COVID pandemic. And I think a good case can be made that this was not some sort of accidental thing that, oh my God, there's a virus and we have to do something, that it was, in fact, it was a planned pandemic, and that most of what was done deliberately. It had quite an effect on civil liberties, that we saw small businesses shut down, while large big box places and Amazon and whatnot were considered essential. Put scare quotes around that. And what was really striking on the medical front was that there was a change in how doctors dealt with their patients. I remember going to my general physician in 2020 for a routine checkup, and of course this was I think in the spring when the COVID was considered to be raging, so to speak. And I asked her, what should I do if I contract the disease? And her answer shocked me. She said, I have nothing for you. And she then tried to basically scare me into wearing a mask all the time, which I already knew to do my own research was totally useless against a virus, by telling me an anecdote about a patient who had shown a house that was for sale to clients while not wearing a mask, and then they had come down with COVID and so on and so forth. And I then asked her, well, I understand that hydroxychloroquine can be useful in treating COVID. And she immediately told me that, no, it creates problems with the heart and it's totally ineffective. And I realized that what she was telling me was not true, because I had already read that there was a study that had been posted in The Lancet essentially saying these things that had been proved to be completely fraudulent because it was based on databases that were proven to not exist. And I didn't argue with her because I could see that she was totally committed to the narrative that she was putting forth, and I didn't feel that would be useful. But I had trusted this doctor, and now I realize I couldn't trust her. And I dropped her as my general physician. So that was kind of emblematic for me of what was going on during that period. That we were being told things that weren't true. We were undergoing lockdowns that were not necessary. And people who tried to speak out against this were censored, in that, for instance, doctors who tried to advocate for the use of ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, they had, in some cases, their licenses attacked by medical boards, and they were. This happened, for instance, to Dr. Meryl Nass, a prominent physician up in Maine who was known for her expertise in things like bio-warfare, germ warfare and stuff like that. She testified in front of Congress about this sort of stuff, and she was a very distinguished doctor, but she was attacked for the fact that she had treated patients with hydroxychloroquine. Successfully, by the way. Nobody had complained. So that's the past 5 years have been really, it's kind of taken over what I see going on in many respects.
Mm. All right, Robert Auld. And Fumaleo Chesney, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to the show, dancer and educator.
Thank you to WBAI for this commentary. Much appreciated, Rebecca.
Great. So perhaps I could get your take on what you noticed in the last 25 years.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So for me, the first 25 years of the 21st century have been defined by a series of ruptures that forced collective reckoning. 9/11 reshaped global politics, surveillance, and fear. Hurricane Katrina exposed racial and economic inequities in stark relief. The 2008 financial crisis revealed a system willing to save institutions over people. Mm. The election of Barack Obama symbolized possibilities, while the backlash that followed revealed unresolved fault lines. More recently, George Floyd's murder made visible that many had long lived, but the nation could no longer deny. The pandemic further exposed whose lives are protected and whose are expendable. January 6 underscored the fragility of democracy, while movements like Me Too and global refugee migrations reminded us that people continue to organize, speak, and move despite systemic harm. Now, the rapid rise of AI signals another turning point, raising urgent questions about power, ethics, culture, and who shapes the future. I'm glad to expand on this in conversation. And then in reference to dance, we've had, because of all the pandemic and George Floyd, we've had many dancers doing choreography in all of these things. So, for example, dance stopped being just performance and it became a public language. People have been dancing for resistance now, a turning point in dance with the world changing around it. In 2000 to 2008, globalization speeds up culture and dance started traveling faster than bodies. DVDs and early YouTubes made it possible to learn styles across borders: hip hop, dancehall, West African, Congolese, salsa, Bhangra, without leaving your home. Community studios stayed vital, but the internet became a second studio. Mm. After 2008 financial crash, artists still created others, often with fewer resources. So dance leaned harder into community, mutual aid, and DIY productions. Dance became a way to say, we are still here. 2013 to 2016, dance as protests. It became very much, the Black Lives Matter rose. Dance showed up in streets, in campuses, and community centers as a form of mourning and resistance. Movement became a living memorial and a demand for dignity. And it's just, during the COVID, the pandemic, was the biggest choreography shift in history. COVID changed dance overnight. Studios closed and bodies still needed to move. I actually started a class in Fort Greene Park because I needed to move. Dance went Zoom first, living rooms became stages. We witnessed a rise in dance for wellness, breathwork, somatics, and nervous system care. Dance helped people survive isolation physically, emotionally, and spiritually. 2022 to 2025, dance becomes a digital economy and a credit battle. TikTok short form video turned choreography into viral content, often without fair credit. So this era has forced new questions. Who owns movement? Who gets paid? Who gets named? At the same time, dance exploded globally. Amapiano, Afro beats, K-pop choreo, drill Latin urban styles. And young people began identifying culture through dance the way earlier generation used radio. And, when the world was grieving at 9/11, wars, pandemics, police violence, dance kept offering a human response. Movement is how communities remember, resist, and rebuild. The first quarter of this century, dance didn't shrink. It became medicine, protest, education, and a global bridge. And there's a lot more I can say, but in the last 25 years, dance has transformed from entertainment into a global language of survival and power. We watch culture speed up from early YouTube to TikTok, where choreography can travel the world in minutes. But dance wasn't only online, it showed up in the streets. And, I said that before, but basically, when it came to the political side and the dance side, it's all been really explosive. That's the word I want to use.
Wow, that's an incredible summary of what's been happening in the dance world, and thank you for your take on the political signatures of the first quarter. I wanted to ask perhaps all of you, because you all have families, what you've seen within your families, the changes over the last 25 years, what you've noticed from your own relations.
Okay, I can take that up. I may have to leave a little early, Rebecca.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so in my family, people are more guarded. We don't trust each other ever since the pandemic. One little cough, one little sneeze, people are already putting on their masks because they think you have COVID again. People are very afraid of what's going on with all the wars and also with all of the refugees, and also now with ICE, what's going on, getting rid of people, even if they have, even if they're U.S. citizens, people are being, exited from the country. So I think, and my family is not from here, so we are definitely on alert.
And Kathy Kelly?
Well, I've felt very familial with young people whom I first began to visit who live in Afghanistan. I got to know them initially in 2009, and they're not my blood relatives, but I felt very close to them, particularly after the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. They were in great jeopardy, and they were desperate to get out. And so that grouping has been resettled now, 100 of them, and largely through the support of internationals. And I think, for people in the United States, internationals who thought, well, we owe something to Afghanistan along the line of reparations because of what the United States did to the country. So I've watched young people with tremendous resilience resettle in other places. They didn't want to leave their homeland, and they miss their homeland desperately. But they are trying to start over with new lives. And while that was happening, my own blood relations, I think, felt much more awareness and empathy, and I suppose a stronger recognition that, our parents came to this country, the United States, seeking refuge, or our grandparents, and that when people are forcibly displaced, whether through poverty or through war, it's a punishment that people certainly didn't ask for and they didn't deserve. So I think that there's been more empathy within my own family members. And then there's a kind of a searching that goes on amongst those young Afghans. I'd like to quickly mention that I'm thrilled to be able to tell them that in late April, an artist from Vietnam, Andrew Tuan Nguyen, will install a 27-foot high replica of a very renowned statue of a Buddha from Afghanistan. The Taliban disfigured the statue. And so this artist is going to unveil the replica on the Highline plinth in New York City. And the hands of this Buddha, the mudra, will be made from molten armored bullets that came also from Afghanistan. They've been smuggled out of the area of Bamyan, bullets that the United States had left strewn on the ground. And those will become the hands of a statue. And one hand symbolizes compassion. The other is raised as a warning, a rebuke to the war makers. Don't do it again.
Mm. Well, we'll have to check that out when it gets installed. Thank you for that, Kathy Kelly. Caleb Maupin, you do grassroots organizing. What are you seeing from that family and your own family in terms of their reckoning of the changes in society?
Well, I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and it's funny because I think about how prosperous the economy was when I was a kid there in the 90s and how devastated it has become. When I talk to my family from Ohio, I mean, the town that I grew up in has depopulated. Its population has gone down by 20-30% because people just can't afford to live there anymore. The number of people who went to high school with me who died from opioids is quite large. I mean, it's quite significant. And that has been kind of the story, is the decline of, the American dream. In the 90s, things had started to decline a little bit, but there was kind of a rebound after the fall of the Soviet Union. But, really since the beginning of the 21st century, there's been just a steady decline in the living standards of people, especially in the heartland of America, in the Midwest, in the South. And so, when I talk about that, and I think that the economic anxiety that young people feel being stuck in a lifetime of low wage service sector jobs, the anxiety of the gig economy and all of that. I think that's very much when you talk about what we're facing. I think that's very much what we're facing. Also, I would say that social media has changed the way people interact and see themselves, and that a lot of mental health issues are now out there in ways they weren't before, because we now interact with each other via screens and phones that we carry with each other everywhere, and that the way we view each other, the way we interact with each other, the way we relate to each other is now completely altered by technological breakthroughs.
When you bring up mental health, though, are you saying that people are identifying issues they might have, or they're being identified more, or what do you mean specifically about that?
Well, just the way people interact with each other has changed so much because everything's being filtered through screens, through social media apps, et cetera. And especially since the pandemic, when we were all isolated and in lockdown, we couldn't gather together, that became even more blatant. And that, I've heard comedians joke about how, back in the day when you went to your friend's house and you rang the doorbell and you were waiting for them to come to the door, you just looked at the ground. You just looked at the ground. But nowadays, while you're waiting for your friend to come to the door, you pull your phone out and you look at this and you look at that, and that everything we're doing is kind of filtered through this internet universe, this artificial reality that's been created, and it has just changed the way people see themselves, the way that they interact with other people. Everything is completely new, and we're less used to dealing with it as a society, and so there's a lot of new issues that people have in terms of self-esteem, in terms of friendships, in terms of connections, that are just not there. I mean, the amount of people who cut off their relatives over a political disagreement that might never have come up in a previous time, it just never would have come up. But you see something your relative posted, and then they end up cutting off and ending their relationship with their uncle or their aunt or their cousin or something because of a political disagreement that they would never have known about in a previous time, for example. Or people, judging themselves and comparing themselves because everyone else's business is up on Facebook, or everyone else who is out there, they're comparing themselves to other people constantly in ways that weren't an issue before. And I feel we'll figure this out. Human beings always do, but there's been a new change in how we interact with each other based on new technology, and that's causing new problems that need to be resolved.
I mean, it is this strange hybrid we're in, which is reality. What we see, if I step out of the studio and I'm on Atlantic Avenue and I'm interacting with people, I'm talking to the mailman, and then this other world that, it's virtual, the profile I'll keep here and the posts I post there, and it's schizophrenic, if you want to talk about mental illness. And Robert Auld, have you noticed any changes in your family life, changes in your interactions with relatives?
Well, I certainly agree with Caleb that the rise of technology has affected people a lot, though I don't feel it so much on my family side that my family's been kind of dispersed. I have a sister who lives in Colorado and another who lives in Israel, so we don't see each other very much. So actually Zoom is kind of, we see each other more than we used to. But on the other hand, I have relatives of my wife here on the East Coast, and during COVID, especially when the vaccines came in, the fact that I didn't take the vaccine meant that at least one of them didn't want to be in my presence. And that was quite disturbing, of course. And so I felt that that added to the sense of isolation I felt, that there was a period of, I don't know, maybe 6 months when I couldn't have a sit-down meal in a restaurant in New York City. That was distressing. So I have felt the isolation that the events of the past several years have brought to us personally, and it's not a good thing. And I think people are starting to think about fighting back against it and making sure we have more face-to-face communication, that screens can only do so much for you. Yes.
So we're sort of got about 10 more minutes. About 10 more minutes. We're starting now the second quarter of the 21st century. What are you all focusing on? We're just about to celebrate the new year. What are you individually going to focus on in the coming year, and what's your hope? Yeah. So, Kathy, if we could start with you.
Well, thank you, Caleb. Thank you for mentioning a rebounding of opposition to Western colonial control. I hope that kind of opposition will find expression in a stalwart, determined end to the genocide that continues day after day after day to kill and displace and horribly punish and torment Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory. So I will surely try to work to end the genocide. And I think that, we are all complicit in as much as we watch it on our screens every day. And so how can we end it? I've tried to be a war tax refuser. I haven't paid federal income tax since 1980 because I don't want to pay for weapons. I don't want to help maintain these ghastly weapons. But of course, that's not near enough. And so I want to be in solidarity with people who are resisting the genocide and saying, no more weapons, end the siege, and shun Israel in terms of political and economic interaction, not to have vengeance toward individual Israelis, but the country must be held accountable.
Fumileo Chesney?
Yes. So for me, this coming year, I'm focused on sustainability and legacy. I'm beginning the process of forming my own 501c3, so my work in dance, education, wellness, and cultural leadership can grow with stronger support and reach more communities. I'm also exploring new frontiers in Africa, building relationships and laying groundwork for future collaborations that honor movement as medicine and cultural knowledge as living practice. For me, this next chapter is about impact, not just performance, creating structures that allow the work to live on. I'm shifting from just creating work to building systems that protect the work, the artists, and the communities it serves.
And Caleb Maupin?
Well, I am just blown away by how many things have changed and how much the free flow of ideas, the amount of podcasts and conversations that are taking place where people are talking about ideas in ways they didn't used to. I'm blown away by that, but it has to translate into real action. And events like, the Capitol riot that we heard about, it was referenced earlier, and events like the Palestine protests, events like some of the George Floyd uprising and all of that indicate that the new level of consciousness among the people and outrage about conditions and the deterioration of the Western system is going to manifest itself more and more in terms of not just ideas changing, but real action. And that ultimately, I believe the only future America is going to have is joining with the new economy. We need more distance from the declining old British Empire system, and we need to be closer to the rising new economy in the East. And I'm really excited about the idea of a tunnel under the Bering Sea connecting the United States to Russia. I'm really excited about the Belt and Road initiative of China and the Eurasian Economic Union. And, I hope that forces in America can develop that want us to join the new world and leave the old colonial order behind. And that's what I'm hoping for. And I'm hoping that it manifests itself in terms of a real movement of some kind.
And Robert Auld.
Well, I'd just like to wish everyone a happy 2026. And I am going to continue to watch what is happening. And then that's all for now.
Okay. Well, Kathy Kelly, Caleb Maupin, Robert Auld, Fumileo Chesney, thank you very much for participating in this. I knew it was a big brief, but I have to say your comments and thoughts confirmed that you were the right people to reach out to. So thank you very much for contributing to this show today, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I hope to speak to you again about another topic as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you very much. And a happy New Year.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.